The sun had barely dipped beneath the horizon, casting an eerie red glow across the smoldering remains of the once glorious city. Amid the wreckage, the faint hum of machinery filled the air. It was the last remnant of humanity's once mighty technology. In the midst of it all, a figure stood, silhouetted against the fiery backdrop. Clad in tattered armor, face obscured by a helmet of twisted metal. The silence was shattered by the crackling sound of an old comms device activating. "Can you hear me?" came a voice, distorted and barely audible through the static. It was deep, almost mechanical, but unmistakably human. As the signal cleared, the world watched. On every screen, in every colony across the galaxy, eyes locked on the transmission. The screen flickered before revealing a message, one that would mark the beginning of the end for all who thought humanity was defeated. "Gods," the voice continued, now more chilling than ever. "You should have never let us learn to crawl. The gods, an ancient race that ruled over the known universe for millennia, had long since dismissed humans as insignificant, a species destined for extinction after the Great War. They believed their immortality and power had crushed any trace of human resistance. But they had underestimated one thing: the will to survive. This was no longer a species on the brink of extinction. This was a force that had learned, adapted, and now had harnessed the very technology that the gods had once feared. In the ruins of a forgotten world, the birth of a new weapon began. The gods had given humanity the scraps of their technology, thinking it would ensure their demise. But instead, it became the foundation for a revolution. "Get ready." The voice crackled again, now a whisper against the overwhelming tension. "The Junkyard Genesis has begun, and you will feel the wrath of the weapon we've forged." It was a declaration, a promise, that the gods would soon understand the true power of human ingenuity, and this time, they wouldn't be able to stop it. The universe had long been divided, a vast expanse of territories ruled by the immortal gods. These celestial beings had crafted their empire from the fabric of time itself, manipulating galaxies, stars, and civilizations at their whim. Humanity, once a fledgling species, had been crushed under the heel of their divine rule. Its cities razed, its people scattered, and its culture reduced to ruins. But what the gods never anticipated was the stubborn persistence of humanity's will to survive. Earth, the cradle of mankind, had long since fallen into oblivion. Its remains were little more than forgotten rubble, a dumping ground for the gods' discarded technology. After the Great War, humanity was left with nothing but broken relics, the remnants of a civilization that had once threatened the gods' supremacy. Yet, in the darkest corners of this wreckage, something incredible had begun to stir. Humans, ever adaptable, had started to piece together these abandoned machines, forging weapons and tools from the very scraps the gods had discarded. But these were no mere weapons. They were the culmination of centuries of ingenuity, built not from divine knowledge, but from desperation and defiance. The Junkyard Genesis, as it came to be known, was a fusion of technology and survival, the ultimate human weapon, one that could not be controlled, one that could not be predicted. The gods, in their arrogance, never believed it could be anything more than a nuisance. Now, as whispers of humanity's new power spread across the galaxy, the stakes had never been higher. The very existence of the gods was in jeopardy, and humanity, once helpless, had become the most dangerous force in the cosmos. It began with the shattered remnants of a forgotten moon, once a peaceful outpost in the god-controlled sector. The moon's desolation was no accident. It had been the site of humanity's first bold strike against their oppressors, the first spark of the Junkyard Genesis rebellion. The gods had ignored it at first, dismissing the assault as a fluke, a primitive rebellion unworthy of their attention. But they couldn't ignore the aftermath. The gods had underestimated humanity's ingenuity. They had believed that with their celestial powers, they could dismantle any human threat. But as they sent their fleets to scour the remains of the moon, they found something they never expected. A singular piece of technology, an artificial intelligence, fashioned from scrap and ancient god tech. It was the birth of the human weapon that would challenge the gods, and they were horrified by its potential. Humanity's first test came when the gods, in a fit of fury, sent an elite force to wipe out the rebellion's leaders. They called it the Scorched Judgment, a strike so overwhelming it was meant to erase all traces of resistance. But the humans, with their newfound weapon, had other plans. They didn't fight back with conventional forces. Instead, they used the Junkyard Genesis to outsmart their enemies, turning the gods' own technology against them. The strike was devastatingly successful, but it also marked the beginning of a terrifying cat-and-mouse game. The gods had one advantage: immortality. Humans, however, had learned how to adapt, and each victory came at a steep cost. As humanity began to take control of abandoned worlds, their next challenge emerged. How could they sustain this rebellion long enough to shift the balance of power? Would they become the very thing they despised, tyrants themselves? The stakes had never been higher. Event 1. The Fall of Ethris Prime. Ethris Prime was once a shining example of the gods' power, an entire city encased in a bubble of artificial atmosphere, perched on the edge of a dying star. It was a symbol of divine control, an unbreachable fortress that housed the gods' elite. But to the humans, it was a target, one they couldn't ignore. It began as a simple sabotage mission, intended to cripple the city's energy grid and send a warning to the gods. A group of human infiltrators, equipped with makeshift gear and disguised as maintenance workers, entered the city. They planted a few small devices in key areas. The gods were oblivious, confident in their invulnerability. But the unexpected happened. One of the devices, meant to disable power, triggered a chain reaction. The human tech, scrapped from ancient god machines, began to interface with the city's core systems. The devices weren't just disabling power. They were rewriting the very code of the city's defenses. Ethris Prime's once impenetrable shields began to crack, the energy flowing in chaotic waves. Soon, the entire city was teetering on the brink of collapse. The gods scrambled, attempting to regain control, but it was too late. In the span of hours, Ethris Prime fell, its once mighty towers crumbling, its elite forces helpless against the chaos. The galaxy watched in shock. Humanity had done the unthinkable. Not only had they breached a sacred stronghold, but they had also done so using nothing more than salvaged scraps and broken technology. The gods, enraged and embarrassed, vowed retaliation. But for humans, Ethris Prime was a symbol of their growing power. It proved that even the mightiest of divine empires could be shattered by human ingenuity. The balance of power was beginning to shift, and the universe would never be the same. Event 2. The Tesseract Incident. The Tesseract, an ancient relic from the gods' earliest conquests, was thought to be lost to time. It was rumored to hold the power to rewrite the very fabric of space itself, and the gods guarded it fiercely, hiding it on a remote world far from any prying eyes. That was until a human scavenger ship, looking for raw materials, stumbled upon its location. What started as a routine salvage operation quickly spiraled into catastrophe. The humans had no idea what they had discovered. They found the Tesseract, encased in a field of energy so advanced that even the gods themselves had struggled to unlock its secrets. To them, it was just another relic to scrap and trade. But as they began to dismantle the Tesseract, they inadvertently activated its ancient mechanisms. The device wasn't just a relic. It was a weapon, a tool capable of tearing apart the very fabric of reality. The first rift opened above the planet's surface, distorting the space around it. The second rift began to devour time itself, dragging entire fleets of godships into the past and future in an unpredictable loop. The gods rushed to the scene, but they were too late. The Tesseract was beyond their control, and humanity had set into motion a catastrophe that even the gods couldn't foresee. As entire star systems were thrown into chaos, the human scavengers realized they had done something far greater than they ever intended. The gods' fury was palpable. The Tesseract, now unstable and slipping beyond their grasp, was no longer a relic. It was a weapon of mass destruction. And in the process, humans had just shown the galaxy that their reach extended far beyond the ruins of Earth. The gods' retaliation, the fallacy of divine overconfidence. In the wake of humanity's rising power, the gods, confident in their ancient and unchallenged supremacy, attempted to counter human ingenuity using a combination of brute force and divine deception. Their initial strategy was simple: overwhelm humanity with their might. However, this approach failed in ways they could not predict. The gods sent fleets of their most powerful warriors to eliminate any remaining human resistance. However, humans had learned to adapt quickly. The Junkyard Genesis weapons, cobbled together from scraps and forgotten technology, proved effective at disabling divine ships. What the gods didn't account for was that humanity's guerrilla tactics, honed over centuries of subjugation, outmaneuvered their colossal forces. Humans didn't engage in direct confrontation. They struck at the heart of divine infrastructure, sowing confusion and panic across the gods' vast empire. Attacks on trade routes, sabotage of planetary defenses, and hacking of divine communication networks were their new methods of war. In response, the gods deployed their most fearsome weapon, a hybrid army of immortal soldiers merged with the very fabric of space-time itself. These warriors could appear at any point in time, rendering them virtually untouchable. But they were not invulnerable. The humans, resourceful as ever, infiltrated the central data archives of the gods, retrieving key pieces of information on the temporal warriors' weaknesses. Through the manipulation of ancient god tech, humanity learned to disrupt the soldiers' time-based abilities, rendering them helpless in certain moments. Yet the gods refused to acknowledge the growing power of humanity, doubling down on their belief that their divine might would ultimately crush the rebellion. Their repeated failure to adapt to humanity's unconventional warfare led to the slow but steady unraveling of their empire, as their pride blinded them to the reality that they were no longer the uncontested rulers of the universe. The Galactic Council's underestimation, diplomacy in ruins. The Galactic Council, a collective of interstellar species loyal to the gods, initially attempted to placate humanity through diplomacy, believing that human leaders could be negotiated with. They offered aid, alliances, and trade agreements, assuming that they could manipulate the humans into submission through politics. At first, humans were cautious. Their leaders, survivors of a fallen civilization, were wary of any formal agreements. The idea of trusting the very same forces that had wiped out their homeworld was laughable. But humanity, in its hunger for survival, chose to engage on their own terms. They feigned interest in the Council's offerings, only to use the diplomatic meetings as a front to infiltrate and gather critical intelligence. As trade agreements were signed and diplomatic exchanges took place, human operatives covertly accessed vast quantities of galactic intelligence. The turning point came during the Aldaris Accord, a peace summit intended to restore harmony between the gods' allies and the remaining galactic empires. At this gathering, humans secretly introduced a disruptive technology, an untraceable signal jammer capable of disabling the Council's communication networks. When the Accord was supposed to conclude with a unified stance against humanity, chaos erupted. Representatives were cut off from their respective factions, their military forces left in disarray. The humans had outsmarted the galaxy's most advanced systems, using nothing more than ingenuity and subterfuge. Despite the immediate shock of the disruption, the Galactic Council's response was too late. Their response to human cunning was predictably bureaucratic and slow, with each species offering excuses and half-hearted solutions. By the time the Council realized it had been outplayed, humanity had already begun forming alliances with disgruntled factions, further strengthening its position in the galaxy. Human diplomacy, though often underestimated by the gods and other galactic civilizations, is a delicate blend of subtlety, strategy, and emotional intelligence. At first glance, humans may appear naive or easily manipulated in diplomatic negotiations, but this is a miscalculation. Beneath the surface, their true strength lies in their capacity for resilience, cunning, and, perhaps most dangerously, the art of the unexpected. When humans say, "We'll cooperate," it's rarely as simple as it seems. They'll nod, offer reassurances, and maintain an open demeanor, all while calculating their next move. Beneath the smiles and pleasantries lies an intricate web of mental strategies, each designed to manipulate the conversation toward their own advantage. The human ability to mask intent, combined with their relentless drive for survival, makes them incredibly unpredictable. Where other species might confront issues head-on, humans excel at creating room for ambiguity, allowing them to slip through cracks that others might miss. A human diplomat's greatest tool is empathy. They understand the fears, desires, and motivations of those they negotiate with, often better than their counterparts realize. This psychological insight allows them to appeal to their enemy's weaknesses, playing on emotions like guilt, fear, or pride. When humans listen, they don't just hear words. They read between the lines, assessing body language, tone, and even the smallest hesitations. And when they speak, it's with calculated charm, twisting their words just enough to leave the other party questioning their true meaning. But it's not just manipulation. Human behavior is also guided by a deep-rooted sense of justice and an almost desperate desire for progress. This makes them formidable in negotiations, as they are willing to push boundaries and challenge the status quo in ways others would deem impossible. For humanity, diplomacy is a game of chess where every move, every word, is meticulously planned to turn the tide in their favor. The galaxy's response to the human problem was varied and complex, with different species and organizations attempting to mitigate the growing influence of humanity in vastly different ways. The Xylok Collective, a species known for their overwhelming technological superiority, initially attempted to squash human influence with brute force. They sent an armada of warships to subjugate the scattered human colonies, expecting swift victory. However, they quickly learned the hard way that humans were masters of asymmetrical warfare. Using salvaged god tech and creative traps, the humans outmaneuvered Xylok forces, forcing them to rethink their strategy. Now, the collective has adopted a cautious approach, sending emissaries to negotiate with humanity in an effort to avoid further embarrassment. The Venari Confederacy, an alliance of insectoid species, took a completely different route. Their initial response was to engage humanity in a covert diplomatic war, flooding the galaxy with misinformation and sabotage. They hoped to sow distrust between human factions and other galactic powers. However, humans responded by turning the tables, using the Venari's own spy networks against them. Instead of backpedaling, the Confederacy now sends their diplomats to human worlds, offering trade deals in a desperate attempt to appease the growing human presence. On the other hand, the Aeonian monarchy, a race of near-immortal beings devoted to preserving the status quo, attempted to isolate humanity from galactic affairs. They imposed harsh sanctions on any planet that had a human settlement, hoping to starve them into submission. However, this backfired when humans began to repurpose Aeonian technology to bypass the sanctions, creating a thriving black market for innovation. Now, the monarchy reluctantly opens talks with human diplomats, fearing that their empire could crumble if they don't. The galaxy's strategies are failing. Humanity's resilience, adaptability, and creativity are transforming the balance of power, one scrappy victory at a time. The moment that would define humanity's place in the galaxy arrived unexpectedly. At the Galactic Concord Summit, a peace conference designed to address the rising tensions between the gods' allies and the rebellious human factions. What began as a standard diplomatic meeting quickly turned into the most dramatic incident in galactic history. Humans, true to their nature, introduced a concept that was utterly baffling to the alien delegates: the Junkyard Feast. In an effort to break the ice, human diplomats proposed a banquet that combined foods from every corner of the galaxy, but with a twist. The catch was simple. Every dish had to be made using only scraps and leftover ingredients, echoing humanity's resourcefulness and ingenuity in the face of destruction. The banquet wasn't just about food. It was a metaphor, a statement about survival and defiance in the face of divine oppression. What followed wasn't just a meal, it was a cultural awakening. As species from across the galaxy tasted the food, their minds were simultaneously disarmed by the humanity behind it. The meal, crafted from discarded scraps, represented a revolution in diplomacy. Delegates found themselves questioning the gods' monopoly on power, realizing that even the smallest scrap could be turned into something extraordinary. The Junkyard Feast was not merely an offering. It was a declaration that humanity, despite its humble beginnings, would never again be underestimated. The galaxy had always believed in the invincibility of the gods, the unyielding power of their immortal rule. Yet humanity, using nothing but the scraps of their broken world, had proven that even the most fragile beginnings could challenge the divine. The Junkyard Genesis was more than just a weapon. It was a symbol of resilience, of the unyielding will to survive against impossible odds. As the galaxy watched humanity rise, one truth became painfully clear. The gods' reign was no longer absolute. The once immense empire built on fear and control now found itself facing an adversary it could neither predict nor control. And as human diplomacy unfolded, even the most seasoned diplomats couldn't deny the growing power of human ingenuity and adaptability. But let this be a warning to all. Humanity's rise is not a story of victory alone. It is a story of survival. Those who underestimate them, whether in war or diplomacy, will learn that humans never fight fair. They fight to win. And in the end, it is not the god's strength that will determine the fate of the galaxy, but humanity's ability to adapt, evolve, and turn any scrap into a weapon. The question now is, can the universe survive humanity's next move?